The cargo plane shook violently as it hit another pocket of turbulence over the Afghan mountains. Captain Sarah Mitchell pressed her back against the metal wall, trying to look as unremarkable as possible among the dozen other passengers. She wore standard Army fatigues with no rank insignia visible, her long brown hair tucked tightly under a regulation cap. To anyone looking, she was just another support personnel heading to Forward Operating Base Shank. The other passengers included a mix of soldiers, contractors, and medical personnel. Most slept or stared at their phones, but Sarah kept her eyes on the small group of Navy SEALs sitting near the front of the aircraft. Even in civilian clothes, they were easy to spot. Something about the way they carried themselves, the quiet confidence, the way they constantly scanned their surroundings. Their leader was a tall man with graying temples and intense blue eyes. Captain Jake Morrison, according to the manifest she'd glimpsed earlier. He looked like he'd been through more than his share of combat deployments. His team of 5 men ranged in age from early 20s to late 30s, all with that same alert, dangerous look that marked elite operators. Sarah had her reasons for keeping a low profile. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been Captain Sarah Mitchell, F-16 Fighting Falcon pilot with the 421st Fighter Squadron. She'd flown over 200 combat missions across Iraq and Afghanistan, with 12 confirmed air-to-ground kills and 2 air-to-air victories against Syrian MiGs. But officially, Captain Sarah Mitchell was currently on medical leave recovering from a training accident. In reality, she was on a classified mission that didn't officially exist. Intelligence had confirmed that a high-value target, a bomb maker responsible for at least 30 American deaths, was hiding in a remote valley near the Pakistani border. The location was too dangerous for a normal extraction team, but too important to ignore. Sarah's job was to get close, confirm the target's location, and call in a precision strike. The cargo plane lurched again, and she noticed one of the SEALs checking his watch. Morrison was studying a tablet, occasionally pointing at the screen while talking quietly to his men. Whatever they were planning, it looked serious. 15 minutes to Shank, the loadmaster called out over the engine noise. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her stomach that came before every mission. She'd been flying combat sorties for 6 years, but the feeling never went away completely. The difference was that instead of strapping into an F-16 cockpit, she was about to disappear into the mountains on foot with nothing but a backpack and a rifle. The loadmaster moved through the cabin, checking that everyone was properly secured. When he reached Sarah, she noticed him glance at her hands. Fighter pilots developed distinctive calluses from gripping control sticks during high-G maneuvers. She'd been wearing gloves for weeks to hide them. Morrison suddenly stood up and walked to the center of the cargo bay. His voice carried easily over the engine noise when he spoke. "Listen up, everyone. I just received word that we have a developing situation at Shank. A coalition convoy was hit by an IED about 20 clicks northeast of the base. Multiple casualties, including the loss of their close air support. The rescue birds are grounded due to weather, and we're looking at a potential overrun situation." The cabin went quiet except for the steady drone of the engines. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She knew that area well from previous air missions. It was a narrow valley with steep walls on both sides, perfect for an ambush. Morrison continued, "My team is being tasked with immediate deployment to support the rescue operation. The problem is, we need someone who understands close air support coordination. Our usual guy is laid up with a broken leg from last week's op." He paused, scanning the faces around him. "What we really need is someone with combat pilot experience. Someone who knows how to talk to fast movers and guide them onto target without hitting friendlies." Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Everything about this situation was wrong for her cover story, but she could see the desperation in Morrison's eyes. She'd been in enough similar situations to recognize the look of a commander who was rapidly running out of good options. "The convoy commander is a good friend of mine," Morrison added. "Staff Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez. 3 tours, 2 Bronze Stars, and a new baby girl back home. If we don't get effective air support coordinated within the next few hours, A lot of good people are going to die. The SEAL captain's eyes swept across the passengers one more time. I know it's a long shot, but does anyone here have any combat pilot experience? Anyone who's worked close air support missions? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Sarah could hear her own breathing inside her helmet. Her orders were crystal clear: maintain operational security at all costs. Her real mission depended on complete anonymity. If she revealed herself now, everything would change. But she kept thinking about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and his new baby, about the convoy pinned down in that valley with no air support, about all the times she'd been the one providing that life-saving close air support from 30,000 feet above. Slowly, almost without conscious decision, she felt herself beginning to stand up. The movement caught Morrison's attention immediately. He turned toward her with a mixture of surprise and hope on his face. Around the cabin, other passengers were turning to look as well. Sarah realized she was at a crossroads that would change everything. Once she stood up completely, there would be no going back to her cover story. Her classified mission would be compromised. But the alternative was letting a convoy full of soldiers die when she had the skills to help save them. She thought about her father, a Vietnam veteran who'd always told her that sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. He'd said that the hardest choices usually involved people you'd never meet, people who would never know your name, but whose lives depended on your decision in that moment. The cargo plane hit another patch of turbulence, causing several passengers to grab for handholds. In the brief chaos, Sarah made her choice. She stood up fully, removing her cap and letting her hair fall loose around her shoulders. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. What had appeared to be just another support soldier was now clearly a woman, and clearly someone with the bearing of an experienced officer. Morrison's eyes widened as he took in the change. "Ma'am?" Sarah looked him directly in the eye. "Captain Sarah Mitchell, United States Air Force, 412 combat flight hours in F-16s, specializing in close air support and precision ground attack." Her voice carried clearly through the cargo bay. "I've coordinated with ground teams in exactly the kind of situation you're describing." The SEAL captain stared at her for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Captain Mitchell, I think you might just be the answer to our prayers." The other SEALs were exchanging glances, and she could see the mixture of surprise and approval on their faces. She'd just blown her cover completely, but looking at Morrison's expression of relief, she knew she'd made the right choice. "Sir, I need you to understand something," Sarah said. "I'm not supposed to be here. Officially, I'm on medical leave. If I help you with this mission, there are going to be questions later." Morrison nodded grimly. "Captain, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know what it means when someone says they're not supposed to be somewhere. All I care about right now is that convoy, and you're the best hope they've got." He gestured toward his men. "These are the best soldiers I've ever worked with, but none of them can talk to an F-16 pilot in language that pilot understands. Can you do that?" Sarah felt the familiar surge of confidence that came with being asked to do what she'd trained for her entire adult life. "Yes, sir. I can do that." The loadmaster's voice crackled over the intercom. 5 minutes to Shank. Prepare for landing." Morrison was already moving, pulling out his tactical radio and starting to coordinate with the base. Sarah found herself suddenly surrounded by the SEAL team, all of them talking rapidly about radio frequencies, target coordinates, and ammunition loads. As the cargo plane began its steep descent toward Fob Shank, Sarah realized that her quiet infiltration mission had just become something completely different. Instead of disappearing into the mountains alone, she was about to walk into a firefight with some of the best soldiers in the American military. She thought briefly about her original target, the bomb maker hiding in his mountain stronghold. That mission would have to wait. Right now, There were American soldiers in immediate danger, and she had the skills to help save them. The plane touched down hard on the rough airstrip, and Morrison was immediately on his feet. "Captain Mitchell, we've got about 10 minutes to get you briefed and equipped before we load onto the rescue birds. Are you ready for this?" Sarah shouldered her pack and checked her weapon. After 6 years of flying combat missions from the relative safety of a fighter cockpit, she was about to find out what it was like to coordinate air support from the ground, in the middle of an active firefight. "Lead the way, Captain," she said. As they moved toward the aircraft door, she caught Morrison looking at her with curiosity. "Can I ask you something, Captain? What were you really doing on that transport?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Getting to where I needed to be, sir." Apparently, this was where I needed to be. Morrison nodded, seeming to understand that some questions were better left unasked. As the cargo door opened and the hot Afghan air rushed in, Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to step into whatever came next. The convoy was still out there, still in danger, and now she was their lifeline to the sky. The command post at Fob Shank buzzed with controlled chaos. Sarah found herself seated at a metal table covered with maps, radio equipment, and satellite photos while Morrison's team gathered around her. The base commander, Colonel Williams, had given them priority access to everything they needed. "Okay, Captain Mitchell," Morrison said, pointing to a detailed topographic map. "Here's what we know. Bravo Company's convoy was hit right here, in the Korengal Valley, about 20 clicks northeast. They were returning from a village patrol when an IED took out their lead vehicle." Sarah studied the map carefully. The valley was narrow, maybe 200 meters wide at its widest point, with steep mountainsides rising on both sides. Perfect terrain for an ambush, terrible terrain for a rescue. Morrison continued. "The explosion killed their driver and wounded 3 others. While they were dealing with casualties, they started taking small arms fire from multiple positions on the ridgelines. Then their Apache escort had to return to base due to a mechanical issue." "How many people are we talking about?" Sarah asked. 12 soldiers, including Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. They've got good cover behind their vehicles, but they're basically pinned down. Every time they try to move, they get lit up from the high ground." Sarah traced the valley with her finger, visualizing the geometry of an air attack. "What kind of air assets do we have available?" "That's the good news," said Petty Officer First Class Danny Chen, Morrison's communications specialist. "We've got 2 F-16s on station, call signs Viper 1-1 and Viper 1-2, plus a B-1 bomber about 30 minutes out with a full load of precision munitions." Sarah felt a familiar thrill at the mention of the F-16s. She'd flown with pilots from that squadron before. They were good, experienced, and they knew how to put ordnance exactly where it needed to go. "The bad news," Morrison continued, "is that without someone on the ground who can properly coordinate, those pilots can't risk firing with our people so close to the targets." Sarah nodded. Close air support was as much about what you didn't hit as what you did. With friendly forces pinned down in a narrow valley, any mistake would be catastrophic. "What's the current tactical situation?" she asked. Morrison pulled out his radio and switched to the convoy's frequency. "Rodriguez, this is Morrison. Give me a sit rep." The voice that came back was tight with stress, but professional. "Morrison, good to hear you, brother. We've got at least 15 to 20 fighters on the ridge lines, maybe more. They're spread out over about a click of high ground, firing from prepared positions. We've tried to break contact twice, but they've got the whole valley covered." Sarah took the radio. "Rodriguez, this is Captain Mitchell, Air Force. I'm going to be coordinating air support for you. Can you give me a better picture of the enemy positions?" There was a pause, then Rodriguez came back. "Ma'am, they're dug in good. I can see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions on the north ridgeline, maybe 4 on the south. They've got us in a crossfire, and every time we try to move, they pour it on." Sarah studied the map again, then turned to Morrison. "How are we getting there?" 2 Blackhawks, full combat load. My team plus you, and we'll insert about a click west of the convoy position. Close enough to provide immediate support, far enough to avoid the main engagement area. She looked around the table at Morrison's men. Besides Chen, there was Chief Petty Officer Mike Torres, a weapons specialist built like a linebacker. Petty Officer Second Class Alex Washington, a medic with intelligent eyes and steady hands. Petty Officer Second Class Jake Stevens, a demolitions expert who looked barely old enough to drive. And Petty Officer First Class Carlos Mendez, a sniper whose rifle case never left his side. "Captain," Torres said, "no disrespect, but have you ever called in airstrikes from the ground before? It's different than flying the missions yourself." Sarah met his gaze. "Chief, I've flown close air support missions for ground teams more than 200 times. I know what it looks like from 30,000 feet. The difference is, now I'll know what it looks like from down here too." Morrison checked his watch. "We need to move. The weather window is closing, and Rodriguez's people don't have all day." As they gathered their gear, Sarah found herself being equipped with tactical radio headsets, GPS units, and a laser target designator. The equipment was familiar from her survival training, but this was the first time she'd use it in actual combat. "Captain," Chen said as he helped her adjust her radio harness, "you'll be on multiple frequencies. We'll have the ground team on TAC 1, air assets on TAC 2, and the command post monitoring on TAC 3. Once we're on the ground, you're basically the air traffic controller for this whole operation." Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her. It was the same mental state she'd entered before every combat flight, that calm clarity that came from years of training and experience. The Blackhawks were already spinning up when they reached the flight line. The pilots, both warrant officers with thousands of hours in combat zones, gave her curious looks but asked no questions. In special operations, you learned not to question unexpected passengers. As they lifted off into the afternoon heat, Sarah found herself pressed between Morrison and Torres in the cramped cabin. The helicopter flew fast and low, following terrain features to avoid potential threats. Through the open door, she could see the rugged Afghan landscape rushing past below. "5 minutes out!" the crew chief called over the intercom. Morrison handed her a tablet displaying real-time imagery from a surveillance drone circling the target area. She could see the convoy vehicles clearly, arranged in a defensive circle in the middle of the valley. Occasionally, tiny flashes appeared on the ridgelines as the enemy fighters fired down at them. "There," Morrison pointed at the screen. "You can see the muzzle flashes. They're well concealed, but they're there." Sarah studied the pattern of fire. The enemy had positioned themselves expertly, with overlapping fields of fire and good escape routes. This wasn't a random ambush by inexperienced fighters. These were professionals who knew their business. "Rodriguez is going to mark his position with IR strobes," Chen told her. "The enemy can't see them, but our pilots will. That'll help you keep track of exactly where our people are." The Black Hawk began a steep approach into a small clearing about a kilometer from the firefight. Sarah could hear the distant sound of gunfire now, the sharp crack of AK-47s mixed with the heavier reports of American M4 carbines. As soon as they touched down, Morrison's team was in motion. They moved with the fluid precision of men who'd done this countless times before, spreading out into a defensive perimeter while Sarah set up her communications equipment. "Viper 1-1, Viper 1-2, this is Dust-Off Control," she called on the air support frequency. "I'm your new ground controller. Call sign Dust-Off Control. How copy?" Dust-Off Control. "Viper 1-1, good to have you on station. We've been holding high and waiting for clearance to engage. What do you have for us?" Sarah felt a surge of confidence as she fell into the familiar rhythm of air-to-ground coordination. "Viper flight. I have multiple enemy positions along ridgelines and grid coordinates." She read off the precise locations from her GPS unit. "Dust-Off Control. Viper 1-1 copies all. We're carrying 4 GBU-12 laser-guided bombs each, plus full 20mm cannon loads. What are your restrictions? Viper Flight, be advised friendly forces are located in the valley floor at... Sarah provided Rodriguez's coordinates. Minimum safe distance is 200 meters from friendlies. You are cleared hot on designated targets only. Through her binoculars, she could see the convoy position clearly now. The vehicles were arranged in a tight circle, with soldiers taking cover behind engine blocks and wheel wells. Occasionally, one of them would return fire toward the ridgelines, but they were clearly outgunned. Morrison crawled up beside her. How does it look? The enemy knows what they're doing, Sarah replied. They've got interlocking fields of fire and good concealment, but they made one mistake. What's that? They stayed in position too long. Now I know exactly where they are. She keyed her radio. Viper 1-1, this is Dust-Off Control. I'm going to mark targets with laser designation. Stand by for coordinates. Sarah activated her laser target designator and painted the first enemy position. The invisible infrared beam would show up clearly on the F-16 pilot's targeting displays. Dust-Off Control, Viper 1-1 has your sparkle. I can see multiple heat signatures in that location. Looks like at least 3 personnel. Roger. Viper 1-1. That's Target Alpha. You are cleared hot. Viper 1-1 is in hot, south to north. Sarah watched through her binoculars as the F-16 rolled into its attack run. The aircraft was just a tiny speck against the sky, but she could track its approach by the sound of its engine. The pilot would be lining up his targeting system now, making final adjustments for wind and distance. Rifle! The pilot's voice crackled over the radio, indicating he'd released his weapon. Sarah kept her laser designator steady on the target, knowing that the guidance system in the bomb was following her beam down to its destination. Around her, Morrison's team had spread out in defensive positions, ready to deal with any enemy fighters who might try to escape the bombing. The explosion, when it came, was perfectly placed. The GBU-12 detonated directly on the enemy position, sending a column of smoke and debris high into the air. Secondary explosions followed as enemy ammunition cooked off. Good hit! Good hit! Sarah called. Target Alpha is neutralized, moving to Target Bravo. She was already painting the next enemy position when her radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice. Dust-Off Control, Rodriguez. Outstanding work. That position had us completely pinned down. We're taking a lot less fire now. But Sarah was focused on the next target, watching as Viper 1-2 lined up for his attack run. The second F-16 came in from a different angle, and his bomb was equally precise. Another enemy position disappeared in smoke and flame. Viper 2-2, stand by! A new voice came on the radio. This is Bone 6-5. I'm your B-1 bomber, carrying 8 GBU-31s and ready to play. Sarah grinned. 8 2,000-pound precision bombs would definitely change the tactical situation. Bone 6-5, Dust-Off Control. Welcome to the party. I've got targets for you. The airstrikes continued for the next 20 minutes, each one carefully coordinated to avoid any risk to the pinned-down convoy. Sarah fell into a rhythm she'd never experienced from the ground, but that felt completely natural. She was the link between the soldiers in the valley and the aircraft overhead, and she could feel the tactical situation shifting in their favor with each successful strike. When the last enemy position was neutralized, and strange quiet settled over the valley. After hours of constant gunfire, the silence felt almost unnatural. Rodriguez, this is Morrison. How's your situation? Morrison, Rodriguez, we are green across the board. Whatever magic that Air Force lady worked up there, it was exactly what we needed. The road is clear, and we're ready to move. Sarah was already coordinating with the medical evacuation helicopters for the wounded soldiers. But as she worked, she became aware that Morrison was watching her with an expression of professional respect mixed with curiosity. Captain, he said during a brief lull in radio traffic, that was some of the best air coordination I've ever seen. Where'd you learn to do that from the ground? Sarah smiled. I didn't, Captain. I learned it from the air, looking down. This was my first time doing it from down here. Morrison stared at her for a moment, then shook his head in amazement. Ma'am, you just saved the lives of 12 soldiers, and you were making it up as you went along? Not making it up, Sarah corrected. I knew what those pilots needed to hear, because I've been one of those pilots. I just had to learn how to say it from a different perspective. As they prepared to move out and link up with the rescued convoy, Sarah realized that her original mission was now completely impossible. There was no way she could disappear back into anonymity after what had just happened. Too many people had seen her, heard her voice on the radio, watched her coordinate the airstrikes. But as she watched the Blackhawks coming in to evacuate the wounded soldiers, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with her original classified objectives. Sometimes the mission you ended up on was more important than the mission you started with. Morrison appeared beside her as they loaded their gear. Captain, I don't know what you were really doing on that transport, and I'm not going to ask, but I'm damn glad you were there. Sarah shouldered her pack and headed toward the helicopter. Her real mission might be compromised, but she'd found something more valuable, the knowledge that when the moment came to choose between following orders and saving lives, she'd made the right choice. As they lifted off, she could see Rodriguez's convoy below, already moving safely toward the main road. 12 soldiers were going home because she'd stood up when Morrison asked his question. That had to count for something. The debrief room at FOB Shank felt different at midnight. Earlier, it had been filled with urgent planning and rapid-fire coordination. Now, with the successful rescue complete and all wounded soldiers stable, a quieter tension filled the air. Sarah sat across from Colonel Williams, Morrison, and a man in civilian clothes who'd introduced himself simply as Mr. Patterson from Kabul. Patterson's presence told Sarah everything she needed to know about how seriously her blown cover had been taken. Men like Patterson didn't fly to remote forward bases at midnight unless something very important had been compromised. Captain Mitchell, Colonel Williams began, what you did today saved 12 lives. I want that to be absolutely clear before we discuss anything else. From a tactical standpoint, your actions were exemplary. Sarah kept her expression neutral. Thank you, sir. Patterson leaned forward. However, Captain, we need to discuss the classified operation you were assigned to. An operation that, officially, you've now compromised. I understand that, sir. Morrison shifted in his chair. With respect, whoever you are, Captain Mitchell made the only choice any decent human being could make. She saved American lives. Patterson's gaze didn't leave Sarah. Captain Morrison, I appreciate your loyalty to Captain Mitchell, but there are bigger pictures here that you're not aware of. Sarah spoke for the first time since sitting down. The bomb maker, Ahmad Nazir, he's still out there. Patterson nodded slowly. You were briefed on the target. Our intelligence indicates he's responsible for at least 30 American deaths, with more attacks being planned. Your mission was to locate and confirm his position for a precision strike. And now that mission is blown because too many people know I'm here, Sarah said. Correct. Morrison looked between them. What bomb maker? What are you talking about? Colonel Williams answered. Captain Mitchell was operating under deep cover to locate a high-value target in the mountains near the Pakistani border. Her cover as a support soldier on medical leave allowed her to move freely without drawing attention. Jesus, Morrison said, understanding dawning on his face. Captain, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Sarah shook her head. Don't be sorry, Captain. I made my choice. Patterson opened a tablet and showed them a satellite image. Here's the problem. Nazir's bomb-making operation is located in a cave complex in these mountains. Our window to get him is closing rapidly. Intelligence indicates he's planning to move deeper into Pakistan within the next 48 hours. Once he's across the border, he becomes untouchable. Sarah studied the image. The target area was remote, mountainous terrain with no roads and limited helicopter landing zones. It would be a difficult operation under the best circumstances. "What's the new plan?" she asked. Patterson exchanged glances with Colonel Williams. "There is no new plan, Captain. Without the element of surprise, we can't risk sending you in alone. The area will be too hot, and Nazir's people will be watching for exactly this kind of operation." "So he gets away?" "Unless we can develop a new approach, yes." The room fell silent for a moment. Sarah could feel Morrison's eyes on her, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. After everything they'd accomplished together, it seemed wrong to let the primary target escape. Morrison cleared his throat. "What if it wasn't a solo infiltration mission?" Patterson looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if Captain Mitchell wasn't going in alone? What if she had backup?" "Captain Morrison," Colonel Williams said, "your team isn't trained for this kind of deep reconnaissance work." "No, sir, but we are trained for direct action. And after seeing Captain Mitchell work today, I think she could coordinate whatever air support we needed to take that target down." Sarah felt a spark of interest. It could work. Instead of a covert observation mission, we go in hard and fast. "Hit the target before they know we're there." Patterson was shaking his head. "The risk factors are completely different. This would be a full combat operation in denied territory, with no backup and no easy extraction route." Morrison leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, that's what SEALs do. And Captain Mitchell just proved she can coordinate air support better than anyone I've worked with." Sarah was already thinking through the tactical possibilities. "The target location has good approaches from the north. If we insert at night, we could be in position before dawn. Hit them when they're not expecting it." "Captain," Patterson said, "this is not your decision to make. Your original mission parameters—" "My original mission parameters didn't account for saving the lives of 12 American soldiers," Sarah interrupted. "Sometimes the situation changes and you have to adapt." Colonel Williams had been quiet, studying the satellite imagery. "What would you need, Captain Morrison?" Morrison looked at his team, who had been waiting outside. Through the window, Sarah could see them checking their weapons and gear. "Full kit, 2 Blackhawks for insertion and extraction, and whatever air support Captain Mitchell thinks we need." "The political implications if this goes wrong are significant," Patterson warned. "If American forces are captured or killed in an unauthorized cross-border operation—" "Then we don't get captured or killed," Morrison said simply. Sarah stood up and walked to the map table. "Show me the intelligence on the target site." Patterson hesitated, then activated his tablet's display on the large screen. The cave complex appeared in high resolution, showing multiple entrances and what appeared to be guard positions. "How recent is this imagery?" Sarah asked. 18 hours. She studied the layout carefully. "I count at least 15 personnel visible, probably more inside the caves. This isn't just a bomb maker. It's a full production facility." Morrison joined her at the screen. "Multiple entrances means multiple escape routes. We'd need to hit them from several directions simultaneously." "Or," Sarah said, "we seal the exits first, then hit the main entrance." They spent the next hour planning. Sarah found herself falling into the same kind of tactical discussion she'd had countless times with other pilots, but now she was planning from the ground perspective. Morrison's team brought expertise in close-quarters combat and demolitions, while she provided air support coordination and target analysis. By 2 a.m., they had a workable plan. A night insertion by helicopter, followed by a coordinated assault on the cave complex at dawn. Sarah would coordinate precision bombing of the escape routes, while Morrison's team assaulted the main entrance. Colonel Williams finally spoke. "This is completely unauthorized. If I approve this mission, I'm putting my career on the line." "Sir," Sarah said, 30 American soldiers are dead because of what that man is building in those caves. How many more will die if he escapes across the border?" Patterson closed his tablet. "I can't officially authorize this operation." "But you won't stop it?" Morrison asked. Patterson looked at each of them in turn. "I was never here. This conversation never happened. If you proceed, you do so without official sanction or support. That was as close to approval as they were going to get. At 0400 hours, two Blackhawks lifted off from Fob Shank, carrying Morrison's SEAL team and Sarah. The flight to the target area took 40 minutes, flying nap of the earth through mountain valleys to avoid radar detection. Sarah found herself once again pressed between heavily armed men in the cramped helicopter cabin, but this time she felt like part of the team rather than a passenger. The SEALs had accepted her completely after watching her work during the convoy rescue. 2 minutes, the crew chief called. Morrison checked his GPS one final time. Remember, we go in quiet until Captain Mitchell gives us the word. Once the fireworks start, we move fast and don't stop until the target is neutralized. The helicopter flared into a landing in a small clearing about a kilometer from the target. As they moved out into the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over her. But this time, instead of sitting in a fighter cockpit, she was walking through hostile territory with a rifle in her hands. The approach took 2 hours of careful movement through rocky terrain. When they reached their observation position, the cave complex was spread out below them in the growing dawn light. Sarah could see guards at the main entrance and movement around what appeared to be a communications antenna. Bone 6-5, this is Dust-Off Control, she whispered into her radio. I have eyes on target. Stand by for target designation. The B-1 bomber was already on station, invisible at 40,000 feet, but loaded with precision munitions. Sarah began painting targets with her laser designator, starting with the escape routes Morrison had identified. Dust-Off Control, Bone 6-5 has multiple sparkles. I count 6 separate target locations. Correct, Bone 6-5. You are cleared to engage targets Bravo through Golf on my command. Hold on target Alpha until further notice. Sarah turned to Morrison. Ready when you are, Captain. Morrison keyed his radio to his team frequency. All stations, this is 1. Execute, execute, execute. The morning erupted in controlled violence. Precision bombs sealed the escape routes while Morrison's team assaulted the main entrance. Sarah coordinated the air support while providing covering fire with her rifle, exactly as she'd trained but never expected to experience in real combat. The fight was over in minutes. When the smoke cleared, the bomb-making operation had been completely destroyed, and Ahmad Nazir was confirmed dead among the enemy casualties. As they waited for extraction, Morrison sat down beside Sarah on a boulder overlooking the destroyed cave complex. Captain, he said, I've been thinking about yesterday when you stood up on that airplane. What about it? You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew that helping us would compromise your real mission. Sarah looked out over the valley where smoke was still rising from the caves. I knew it was possible. But you stood up anyway. Yeah, I did. Morrison was quiet for a moment. My grandfather fought in World War II. He used to tell me that sometimes you don't get to choose your battles, but you always get to choose how you fight them. Sarah smiled. Smart man, your grandfather. He would have liked you, Captain. The sound of approaching helicopters ended their conversation. As they prepared for extraction, Sarah realized that her original mission had failed and succeeded simultaneously. She hadn't been able to complete her covert observation assignment, but she'd eliminated the target anyway. Sometimes the indirect approach was better than the direct one. 3 hours later, back at Fob Shank, Colonel Williams handed her a secure phone call from Washington. The voice on the other end belonged to someone very high in the chain of command. Captain Mitchell, I'm told you've had an interesting few days. Yes, sir. The official report will reflect that Ahmad Nazir was eliminated in a precision airstrike based on intelligence gathered through normal channels. There will be no mention of unauthorized operations or compromised cover stories. I understand, sir. However, Captain, your performance has been noted at the highest levels. When you return to regular duties, you may find some new opportunities available. After the call ended, Sarah found Morrison and his team preparing to return to their home base. They'd been reassigned to a new operation, and their brief partnership was ending. "Captain," Morrison said as they shook hands, "if you ever get tired of flying solo missions, I know a team that could use someone with your skills." Sarah smiled. "I'll keep that in mind, Captain." As his helicopter lifted off, Sarah realized that the past 3 days had changed her in ways she was still understanding. She'd started the mission as a lone wolf operator, trained to work in isolation and maintain perfect operational security. She was ending it as someone who understood the value of teamwork and the importance of making hard choices for the right reasons. Her original cover story was blown beyond repair, but somehow that didn't seem to matter anymore. Sometimes losing one mission led to winning something more important. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's convoy was safe. Ahmad Nazir's bomb-making operation was destroyed. And Sarah had learned that there were things more valuable than following orders perfectly. As she walked across the base toward the transports that would take her back to the regular world, Sarah wondered what her father would think of the choices she'd made. She had a feeling he would approve. After all, sometimes you have to choose between doing what you're told and doing what's right. And Captain Sarah Mitchell had chosen correctly.